All right, this is Jack Donovan, and you are listening to or watching PH2T3R, Pater, the Journal of Solar Culture. And I'm here as always with my co-host, C.B. Robertson, author of many fine books and a fantastic thinker. We had a stupid comment from one of the shows from last week's show from someone who obviously had never seen the show before and had no idea what was going on. It was like it was chastising me for doing exactly what I'm about to do right now, which is talk for the first 5 minutes of the show. He's like, you should talk to your guest, and I'm like, he's not my fucking guest. He's the co-host. Trust me, once he starts talking, it might take him 20 minutes to stop. Like I got to get started. So I'm like, clearly you are not a viewer of the show on a regular basis. Like Chris gets plenty of time to talk. So
some might say
talkers. But, yeah. But anyway, so because we're doing a ritual, yikes, next weekend in South Carolina, and then I'll be doing another one the following weekend. But the theme of the one next weekend is the Lord of the Earth. And for those of you who are just casually watching, the Lord of the Earth is one of our three archetypes in Solar Idealism. And the first two are always the sexiest ones. I'm going to refer to them as the ethereal. Now that I looked that word up and I like it a lot. I mean, in the sky and they're the ones that like people. Obviously, the Father. There's a Father God in every mythology system, and it's very high-minded. It's a very high-minded ideal. And people are very attracted to that, like the great planner, all of Freemasonry or whatever, like the great architect of all things, and people like this is the God figure, right? And then there's the striker, which is our second God archetype in Solar Idealism, and these are all in my book Fire in the Dark. And the striker is obviously the one. He's the way of men. He is the archetype that men gravitate towards first. Like, I want to be the warrior. I want to associate myself with the warrior and the hero and all that, and which is great. But the reality, and then again, that's very glory focused. This very kind of high-minded focus.
It's a good starting point.
And yeah, and it's we are men of the sun, born of the earth, looking forever upward. The upward part is those two gods. They're these high-minded ideals. But the reality of life is that that's not what most of us do with most of our time on this planet. You can train to be a warrior all you want. The amount of times that you're actually going to be a warrior is hopefully very few. And even the people who are professional warriors, the amount of time they actually spend fighting wars, unless you're like in the Roman legions and you just do it every damn day, or you're in deployment like deep in a war. But the amount of time in their lives that most men spend doing that is actually very small. And the same thing, like how much high-minded, like conceptual architecture work do you do? I mean, I do a lot of that in my work. I mean, obviously I'm doing it for the Order of Fire. Like I kind of specialize in that, and Chris does too in his writing, and talking. That's philosophizing. Like, what is good in life? Like, what is good, and what makes sense, and all this high-minded reason. But what most of us do is work to perpetuate life. And that is what the Lord of the Earth archetype is really about, perpetuating human life, realizing that we are actually animals and we have animal needs. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done to have those met. And then to keep whatever order the grand architect, the Father, the Lord, whatever he lays out and whatever the striker is protecting, the Lord of the Earth is the one that keeps it going. Keeps the crops moving, keeps the family happy, Like people always want to, and so we can go through some of the misconceptions I think that a lot of guys have when they come into solar idealism and the Order of Fire, and really kind of parse out like where these boundaries are between the two, between the three archetypes, and what this Lord of the Earth figure does. Because I think people, it's fascinating. I sent Chris some comments that some of the other users had made in the Greater Mandala. We just started this discussion a few days ago, and it's just fascinating the way that I've put together a chapter in Fire of the Dark about what the Lord of the Earth means, and then you have right away all of these other guys bringing their take on it, like their feel for it, like what they got from it, and then they kind of expand it and associate it with something they already know or someone they already understand. And I mean, that's what happens with belief, and that's why, and with God figures and all that. So it's just fascinating to me to watch. None of it was wrong, but it was just like, oh, okay, that's what you're keying into with this. And one of the things that I wanted to point out right away, we had a guy who asked a question, which was really smart. He didn't ask a question; he just kind of made a statement that he felt very at odds with the Lord of the Earth. Because of what he was doing for a living. And he said what he's doing for the living was, I think, literally working in like a coal mine like situation with like heavy machinery digging up the earth, and I can see, he's like, it's basically the last thing I would associate with the custodianship of the earth. But well, one of the things that I wanted to point out about that is that, in a lot of these, especially like pagan and neo-pagan and heathen kind of scenes, this Frey figure, because Frey would be one of the Lord of the Earth, archetypes that we pull from. There's a tendency to get kind of hippie with it, and like, he's attuned to the Lord, and he's there as a steward of the earth and whatever, and to have it be, very much, like us servants of the earth in a way, like and that like gets into the realm of, like I said, Viking Wicca, and then to where you're like it becomes an Earth Mother religion almost, and that's not really what his function is from solar idealism. And I think I said it in Fire in the Dark. The words camp, I think originally in like the Proto-Indo-European goes back to like to bend, something like that. There's a root there that means like to bend. I'd have to check it, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. And it struck me at the time I was thinking about it, because that's what we do to make human life work, to create civilization, to create villages, to create anything. We take the natural world and we do what we want with it. Yeah. Basically, we bend it into, right away, you're going to make it clearing, you're going to cut down all the grass, you're going to like, okay, we're going to make the house, we're going to cut down some trees, we have to do all this stuff. We bend the world to our will, bend the natural world to our will, in order to create the situation that we that we need, that we want. And while I'm obviously not saying that solar idealism is of the perspective of like, yeah, just like trash the earth, is certainly not something I would advise or say is cool. I would like, when I heard that guy make that comment, I'm like, sounds like you're working at a job is what it sounds like. Like that's not your responsibility. You didn't, unless you own the coal mine, that's not you're actually doing the Lord's work in your own life, because you need a paycheck, and you need a paycheck, and you need to, like, maybe you have a family you have to support and whatever, and you're out there working every day, and that's what the Lord of the Earth does. I mean, that's like that, and it doesn't, the bigger context of, is this is this bad for the earth, isn't so much the point. Like, go ahead. What you're
it includes that, but I wanted to jump in because a friend of ours who has begun to call himself the Lord of the Earth is a gentleman named Josh Tyler. Some of you who listen to this might know him. He is literally a heavy equipment operator who helps build like roads and things. And I mean, you can hear Lord in the context of the Lord of the Earth and think protector, and that is a legitimate role of a Lord of the Earth.
Right.
And we can get to the sort of relationship between the three in a moment, and why Lord of the Earth is so particularly tricky to pin down. But you can also, it should be pointed out, translate Lord as master. You know, the master of the earth. And so someone who operates heavy equipment and can literally move mountains with their machinery is in many ways more literally a Lord of the Earth than those of us for whom it's about maintaining our relationship and our finances and improving our house and these sorts of things. Although that is all valuable too. The way I have always conceptualized it ever since I read Fire in the Dark, and I think this might be from a particular passage there, or it's my own summarizing in my own head, but basically the father draws the lines and defines the boundaries of the camp at like a conceptual level. Like, this is what we this is where we are, this is who we are. It sets the standards and the goals, draws the lines in the perimeter. The striker protects the perimeter. He's the enforcer of those lines. But everything inside that line, like orienting yourself in the world and protecting yourself, still leaves all of life left to live. Those are just that's just the initial prerequisite framework for the rest of life. But everything else that happens inside those boundaries is in some way outside of the domain of the father and the striker. You don't want to live perpetually on the perimeter unless you're like in Star Trek or something and you're always pushing the boundaries further. The substance of life is what happens inside the perimeter. And I get why many men feel a kind of strange aversion to it, because one, it is mundane in the literal and etymological sense of the term. It is the daily ordinary stuff. It is also the place where men have to interact with women, because that's where women are, inside the perimeter. So there's a little bit of this sex pollution dynamic that you've written about, and other people have written about as well. So I get the aversion to it, and then feel a sense that where I'm needed as a man is on the perimeter. And it wasn't until I, not even when I first became a father, but after, the second or third time, you go away for a little while and then you come back from, business trip or whatever. And you're like, just because inside the perimeter isn't exclusive to men, there are also women and children here, where there aren't in the higher levels of theology and philosophy, or the front lines of wherever we're fighting these days. They still need men here too. And things fall apart without men, psychologically, physically. In some cases, things will begin to collapse and break. I guess my introduction to the sort of Lord of the Earth way of thinking, I've brought this character up many times, but before we had this name, but I think it applies, was Robert Pirsig in Zen of the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and Matthew Crawford to a degree as well. And the mindset of the technician, the Lord of the Earth is about fixing things and also creating things of value and beauty. And I think my favorite example of a mythic god Lord of the Earth is actually in the Iliad. It's in Homer's Iliad, where you have this just absolutely brutal war going on. People are dying of from being stabbed. Far more people are dying of a plague that's sweeping through. They are suffering on the battlefield. They're watching their friends die. They're wondering about what's going to happen with both sides. And you have all of the work of the father and the striker, pushed to the limits in this context. But we only remember it. We only have the story because some poet decided to, in a very beautiful manner, immortalize that for us. And part of what he immortalized is the story of the lame smith god Hephaestus crafting the shield for Achilles. Now, you don't need a particularly magnificent shield to fight. You need something that will stop a sword or a spear. But that's not what Hephaestus is reported to have done. Instead, he crafted this, in Book 18 of the Iliad, everyone should go read it, this incredible shield surrounded by the waters of the ocean. There's the sun and the moon and the stars, and there's two cities, a city at war, a city at peace. There's a wedding going on. There's a trial going on over murder. There are farmers in the fields, all crafted into the shield, which beautifully encapsulates with the artisanal skills of the craft god all of life itself on this artwork that is protecting the warrior from the horrors of combat, and the emptiness of combat. The Lord of the Earth is what brings the value into a world that is otherwise just orientation and subsistence and survival. And that's a huge domain.
No, it is a huge domain, and this is where I think where in different, obviously any kind of pantheon. I'm trying to think. What's there's a technical word for religion with many gods, and I don't have it
Polytheism?
right now. Yeah, duh. Okay. Yes. In polytheistic religions, I was like just blanking on it. But in polytheistic religions, there's a tendency to become increasingly specific in classifying, making up gods for specific things. And so the Lord of the Earth specifically lends himself to that, I think, more than striker.
Yeah,
God is pretty straightforward, but the Lord has so many aspects of what he does that it almost begs to be broken down into like separate gods. You have the one overseer,
relations, building things, fixing things. Luck would probably get worked in there somewhere. The farmers,
art, music,
fishermen, art, music, art, poetry. Art is a funny one that's like right on the border between Father and Lord of the Earth, I think sometimes.
It becomes
depends on the purpose. Depends on the purpose of the art.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things. Good art is probably mostly Lord of the Earth. There's some architect work that goes into art that it kind of comes from the top, like the big picture kind of stuff. You could make an argument toward that, but most of being an artisan is of the Lord of the Earth. I think that falls in that realm. There's in the master planning sense, there is some art to the father role, but I think that it has to pull from that Dionysian part. Otherwise, it's very sterile.
Didactic.
The father would, I mean, in sense of like, we don't want to get in that whole like Apollonian Dionysian rabbit hole, but that's kind of what you're seeing there. Like that would be like if Apollo made up by himself, but not my Apollo that I wrote about, but the Apollo that they call Apollonian. Like if he made art by himself, it'd probably be very boring. Like it would be math. I think. Yeah, I mean, most of that is in the realm of the Lord of the Earth. And you brought up the idea of Lord as master, and I think it's really helpful to think of Lord of the Earth in the context of, say, a medieval, like a feudal society. If you have the king, and the king is the father. The king does the grand overseeing, laws for everyone. Here's the direction of our people are going into. And then an actual lord is the guy who, a baron, or like someone who actually has farms around him and communities and whatever, and has to deal with day in and day out stuff of all the artisans and all the farmers and all the like things that actually have to go on in cities and counties and whatever. And then they send their tax dollars up to the king, and he tells them what to do with it. But I mean, the lord would have his own castle, really, and then if you think of it as a feudal society, there's the castle and all the stuff around it, but that guy isn't the king. That guy's a lord, and that's the way that system worked. And I think that's a really good way to understand that archetype, is that that he's the one on the ground actually dealing with all the aspects of things. So you could have one overarching figure, but then I said, like, it does lend itself to all kinds of breaking down into paganism. It's on the tip of my tongue, so I'm going to say it. There's in learning dance many years ago, like in high school, I learned that there was someone had worked on a form. There's actually something called lab notation, that there's actually a form by which they can write down the choreography of the entire body. Like, someone came up with a system for it.
Oh, wow.
So that they could write down choreography, because how do you write down choreography?
Yeah.
How do you really write down? And so someone created a system that you could basically get all the way down to moving the fingers. And so it exists in the world, and it's always just struck me as this fascinating thing. And that's the way I kind of was thinking about it in my head, of like this, the Lord of the Earth archetype. There's so many little things that you can get into it, like that's almost like lab notation, like all these little aspects and parts and pieces that are part of this bigger system that is the Lord of the Earth. And so, like I said, so his function is to perpetuate life and all the things that go with being a human. And in our system, as we talk about a lot, we're very pro-human. That's kind of a perspective that we've come into in the first year or so of doing this show, and so forth, is that we're take a pro-human perspective. So he's all the good and bad of human life is kind of what he deals with. All the things that bring joy, obviously, all the eros, all the beauty and art and flowers and all these things. All these things are within the domain of the Lord of the Earth. And obviously, alcohol, substances, all that stuff there's always associated with Dionysus and Pan and all the different parts that we associate with the Lord of the Earth, and animals, because you're talking about farming and animal husbandry and so forth, and that brings up a very specific archetype, and you can look it up on Wikipedia. They have a page for it. There is a whole archetype within mythology called Master of the Animals, and it's because there are several different depictions in different cultures of some figure, some guy, and I think this is in the most famous one that I can think of. There's some guy on an urn or a vase or something like that, and he's surrounded by all these animals, and it's a theme, like this man surrounded by all the animals, almost like Saint Francis of Assisi or something like that. But there's always this theme of this man who's surrounded by all the animals, like he's got all the animals listening to him and under control and whatever, and that is a big part. That is part of the Lord of the Earth role as well. It's an archetype that fits into the whole of him. So yes, a lot. One of the things that we've had as a dispute in the Order of Fire is to whether or not he gets hunting, because hunting as a striker, it's striker skills but you're using it, if you're getting something to feed your family, it's probably Lord of the Earth. And also all the dealing with the, the nature that is involved with hunting. Also, it feels very Lord of the Earth and not Striker, whereas Striker would be more like the weapons side of it. And like you're just killing deer so that because you aren't allowed to kill men or whatever. It's but I think that that's a distinction that we've had to make too. So it's just a really in-depth archetype. He doesn't get as much play, I think, as he probably should in our system, because there's so much to him. Like I said, it very much, obviously I started with those first three archetypes, but it does almost beg for more. Like, well, it's Lord of the Earth, but here are like the other 42 aspects of Lord of the Earth.
Right. Well, it's maybe not a bad thing though to have him as something singular as well, because it can be overwhelming, I think, to think of like and to pay due respect to every single sub deity within a growing and increasingly ridiculous and tchotchke like pantheon of little primitive idols that you collect like Pokemon. I think it is very simple and important, I think, for men to remember all three and to embody the skills of all three to some degree. And it's good to have a generalized Lord of the Earth, because not everyone needs to be every single aspect. We don't all need to be, fathers of 12 and master dog trainers and beekeepers and really, really super skillful chefs and plumbers and have the ability to back up a semi truck. And, like every other, like the list of Lord of the Earth skills is theoretically infinite, because there are so many ways that a father could create an order and structure a system, which gives sort of different directions of improvement and maintenance within these systems, and these improvements can be subjective. Sometimes they feel very material. I was on running around fixing people's electrical problems, had some very interesting problems today that people run into issues. They're like, wow, this outlet blew up my vacuum. So they send us out and they're like, oh, someone hooked 240 volts to your duplex receptacle. Let me fix that for you. That feels like a very material kind of thing. And other Lord of the Earth activities, creating enjoyable art, creating fine wine or cheap wine, as the case may be, or music, are a little bit more subjective. But in both cases, it's about creating value within an established system, and that can be material value or social value. But any skill that maintains or creates value, including subjective, is a massive list. And it can be easy, like I was saying before, for men to get overwhelmed by the vastness of it and the mundaneness of these things, and to be like, well, the striker and the father are these kind of sexy, otherworldly, ethereal things that I'm going to be special and focus on that. And if your alternative was a list of 70 little itty bitty sub deities, they would be easy to dismiss or ignore. But if they're grouped up into one category of, and you should pay your due respect to this aspect of life and of your own character, it becomes easier to at least pick some aspects of these to continue to be developing and maintaining in your own life, and to create and bring value within the perimeter to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea of him being Lord, I think you wouldn't take him away. You would just make people under him. You would have sub deities under him. You'd have the main one but then because that's what people do with these kind of religions. It's like they pick their favorite part. They're like, this is what I'm about. So like if there's the carpenter god, then the carpenters are all going to be like, this is my homie. Or like the guys who like welding, or the guys who like welding are going to be into like Hephaestus, like it's like that kind of thing. But the farmers aren't going to care about that. It's one of those things that
there's
breaks
farmer
up
gods, fishermen. It's like Catholic saints. When I was a truck driver, the number of like specifically Saint Christopher like talismans that were at like truck stops and stuff. It is its own little pagan cult thing associated with truck drivers and other travelers. It's that you can have that, but it's still under a broader sort of spiritual framework that's bigger than the individual kind of cult hero or sub deity.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, we're not doing that right now, but it's an opportunity for the future that I could play with. I mean, do we have any comments in there so far?
In reverse order. I'll start. Nick is here. Suffer No Illusion says, "Glory to the first men." Thank you, sir. And Matthew Seneca, a man surrounded by animals, like the Cernunnos relief. Cernunnos relief.
I want to say Cernunnos, but I'm not 100% sure.
I'm not familiar with that, but like you were saying,
it is. I know what he's talking about. It might be the one that they use for the Master of Animals.
Okay.
Cernunnos, I think is one of the. It's like a Celtic god, I believe.
That sounds right. Yeah, and like Iron John would be an example of this character as well, the master of the wood, as you say. And like, to go back to a little bit to the environmentalism angle, because I think a lot of people are like the majority of people, I think, are like maybe not totally sold on the latest supposedly scientific narrative about some projected future or other. But they still care about the environment. They still want to protect the land. They want to protect the forests and to maintain, our national parks, our wild lands, the nature. And I think, anyone who wants to extract something from the environment feels they don't need to be told this. They naturally feel an especially powerful desire to protect this thing. So this is why one of the most successful animal and this might be a case for which side the hunter should fall on. One of the most successful animal preservation projects in the United States history that I'm aware of was done by a group called Ducks Unlimited. Have I already told the story?
Yes.
Okay. So a bunch of hunters who wanted to continue hunting ducks basically got together and decided to be duck conservationists so that they could hunt more ducks. And now we have a lot of ducks.
Right. And that's the case with. I mean, I would have to say that. I mean, that's like a mutually beneficial arrangement. Like we need to protect the ducks so we can kill more of them. But there's I do think there is a cultural element that isn't always there in terms of like people extracting things from the environment. There are a lot of people who would just take it, and don't feel any like in the way that it would seem like most natural to us. They're like, oh yeah, well, you should probably do something about that, not just be a piece of shit.
I think this might go back to differences in founding fathers, so to speak. And I don't mean the American founding fathers, but the fathers that created the cultural norms and ideals from which different cultures are naturally operating and thinking in relation to, so there might need to be integration there if we want to live next door with other peoples and also figure out what to do about, Yellowstone or whatever.
And I think also that maybe people who have spent their entire lives in cosmopolitan areas are going to see that differently than like if you've lived all your life in whatever. Just because I've seen like pictures of it all week long, in Alex Soros's penthouse, like overlooking Manhattan or whatever. If you've lived there all your life, like, what does the natural world even mean to you?
Yeah,
You know, like
it becomes an abstraction, and they
yeah.
simultaneously recklessly destroy it, but they and romanticize it often at the same time. Well, it's really one of the funnier conversations that was going on in this domain. Maybe, well, it pops up every now and again, sort of every few years or so. But the argument between sort of urban environmental romanticists and farmers over what to do about wolves.
Right.
You know, what do you do about those? Well, you know, it's very easy to appreciate their beauty from afar when
Right.
they're not killing your livelihood by the dozen, sometimes just
Right.
for fun.
Right.
You know, they are, and I admit to some degree being one of these urban romanticists. I love that wolves exist out there, and part of me wants there to be more of them. If I owned, you know, a 200 head of sheep, I would probably feel a lot differently. I was the proud owner of 2 goats, little Nigerian dwarf goats, a few summers back. One of them got by a coyote. Now, coyotes are not like wolves in the sense that there's this big argument about preservation. People kill coyotes, have been killing coyotes for practical, preservation of their pets and animals
Indiscriminately, like God.
Well, and it's evolved from just killing them to protect your wildlife into a kind of hobby. People put, suppressors and thermal scopes. You can find YouTube videos of people, picking off coyotes and pigs. Pigs are another one with like thermal optics, like all over the place. It's actually kind of fun to watch.
Here it's actually javelinas.
Yeah.
Like you can, like in Arizona, like you can kill a javelina and no one will ever care.
Yeah, it's like coyotes in most places too, and people have a very you'll see these videos and you'll go down into the comments if you're like me, and you'll see these people who'll say, what kind of person do you have to be to take out an animal that's posing no threat to you like this? And you're like, I, reading your comment, know exactly what kind of place you live in.
Yeah. I mean, it goes either way. I mean, it's like the shooting them for fun thing seems weird. Like if you had land, it seems a little off to me. But the shooting them for, like, if you have land and you don't want. I mean, I was very aware when I had Volgang of the danger of coyote, because like they'll grab a dog and like lure him off and then kill him. Like they take a gang of whatever, and then like the dog wants to investigate, and all of a sudden the dog has like all these coyotes on top of him. And so I was very aware of that. Like, when I would ever bring the dogs out the land and sleep overnight, I was like, fucking coyotes, like I'll fucking kill you all, and so like it becomes very different once you are attached to land, and that seems very like the most natural thing in the world is to be like, okay, these are predatory animals, and like, okay, so we have to protect our things against their things. Then that seems they're like, let's just see how many we can kill for fun. Seems a little off, but whatever. I'm not going to get sad about it.
There's like what we could say, like errors of disposition in sort of either direction. And so I think you can tell a lot about someone's values, what sort of working father they are operating under, based upon which direction they tend to err in. Because I feel the same way. I was raised, my father taught us when we were kids to, you only shoot what you eat. If you're not planning on eating it, you don't shoot it. From a hunting background. And you can expand that a little bit as you get older, but that's still the general spirit I hold today. And I like that. And I don't empathize with or agree with people who shoot for fun. I have killed a fair number of animals as a pest control tech.
some of which were particularly not enjoyable. But I did kill one. I won't mention how I killed it, so I don't admit to some probable crime in a suburban neighborhood. But I had to dispatch a raccoon and a half out of 3 after one killed one of our chickens. This was about a month ago. We found that they had been living under our shed. I think raccoons are cool. I don't like killing them.
I know they're neat. They have little hands. They seem like little friends.
They're super cool. They would be if they weren't absolute like devils disguised in like cute toddler bear clothing. You'd want one as a pet.
I know someone who brought one home, and actually the owner of the big bodybuilder owner of the gym that I was in Salt Lake City had kept the raccoon in his house for like a year or so. And it was hilarious. Yeah, it was hilarious. I mean, it was always getting in the lower doors of the freezer, and it could open it because it could open things and open up cabinets and look for food and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it was amazing.
And so you don't take pride in that. Exactly. It's not like enjoyable, but you got to protect your animals,
Right.
And we stopped the raccoon from eating the chicken, and then the other 2 raccoons, I think I might have killed one more, but I couldn't tell. And then the chickens ate the last chicken. So animals, am I right? But
where was dinosaurs?
Yeah. Chickens are a trip. But that's to bring it back to the whole Lord of the Earth versus Striker. It's kind of a Striker thing. It's kind of a Lord of the Earth thing, I guess. I wouldn't call it Striker just because it's not combat. There wasn't some small chance that the raccoon was going to win that fight,
Yeah.
Now there
chances are never zero.
Never zero. They're vicious, yeah.
They're low, but never zero.
Yeah, right. But there is a chance, a greater than non-zero chance, that if you are not skilled, that you will fail to protect your chickens from return trips. Right. And I think that's where the Lord of the Earth skill comes in, not just in the dispatching, but in the securing of your and the improvement of your area mechanically and environmentally to make it safer and more conducive for your animals and for yourself. And that's most of what we did when I did pest control tech. Yes, we want to get the rats out of your crawl space, but before we can even focus on doing that, we need to secure the perimeter, which again, right. This is like Striker language, but we're not in a fight with the rats. We're in a struggle to maintain the quality of the home, essentially. And so you have to go plug holes, find access points, close them off. And I mean, same thing with electrical problems, finding problems and fixing them, or because the mental place you're in, this mundane skills and knowledge sets that you develop in order to bring this kind of value to people are similar to create things, to perhaps build a house or install electrical system or paint a painting or run a party, whatever the case may be. And problems will arise if you try to run a party. Someone that you were hoping would come won't show up. Hopefully not like a raccoon shows up that you didn't anticipate, but it can happen. The odds are never quite zero. Matthew Seneca says every person has their favorite patron deity. True. He also says, I've heard of something similar with exotic animal hunting. I'm ordered to pay for elephant conservation. They sell only so many hunts and the money goes back to the conservation effort. Yeah, that is totally believable. And the people who are fighting tooth and nail to demoralize the hunters. There was this big campaign against the dentist who posed with an elephant he shot or something. Oh, this is so terrible. It's like, you are not actually protecting these animals in the long run. These moralizing campaigns make you feel good, but as divorced as you are from the Lord of the Earth knowledge base that actually brings the skill to maintain these things, you're just making sounds and hurting things. You can't do anything good without these Lord of the Earth's skills, and these deeper understandings that come from familiarization at a personal and experiential level, and preferably experience developed through life experience and livelihood, and not just
like someone like obviously like a forest ranger or a park ranger or whatever is going to have a way more practical knowledge on how to deal with that situation than some girl on the internet who saw something that makes, because we could all see something that animals are really easy to relate to. I mean, I relate to them really easily. Like, as everyone who knows me knows that like I make voices for animals. Like I'm like a little mini Disney farm myself. My dogs have different voices. I own the voice of someone else's dog. Like I'm the only one who can do it. I definitely relate to animals and really enjoy them. And funny you mentioned elephants, because there was something going around today. Because elephants are crazy smart. And so that's when it gets weird.
Steals someone's hat and hides it under its mouth.
And then
back. Yeah,
that's funny. I mean, they're crazy smart and they're super social, and like they mourn and they get sad, and it's a whole like thing. And apparently there was a thing going around today saying that they've done brain scans, and when they see people, their brains light up in the same way that we get when we see puppies. Like basically they think we're adorable. So
that's awesome.
That's I know that was kind of funny. I'm like, I don't know how you really measure that, but you can kind of see it. Like, they think that humans are cute. So like it's I mean, you never know how much animals know. What consciousness is, it becomes very tricky when you get with the higher animals. I mean, even like we were talking today, actually, another thing that I saw on the internet, which who knows how much stuff is true, but they've kind of validated that dogs understand fairness, which if you have dogs, but you always wonder how much you're like superimposing human values on dogs or whatever. But they say like if one's getting more treats than the other ones, like the dog will like show signs of stress. Like the one who's like getting left out will like be kind of pissed off. And I'm like, that's the way we've always operated. I'm like, well, I can't just simply give Bruder something and not give something to Spike, because then Spike's going mad. But it was cool to see it validated. Like they actually like, yeah.
And it's what you would expect from a social pack mammal species, exactly. like dogs.
They're like, oh, this is the one that's getting I'm the one getting left out. Fuck. It makes perfect sense. But so it's I don't know how we got off an animal tangent, but we're all talking about elephants.
Well, there might be a relevant tie-in to the way that the Lord of the Earth understands other people. I've heard people say that raising kids or dealing with a wife, there's lots of skills you can bring in from dog training, and that can sound very sexist or very, very sort of patronizing. But I would add that for wives, it's also a very good way to approach your husbands too, because we are mammals, we are animals, and I think the Lord of the Earth as a sort of framework for seeing the world, as opposed to the striker or the father, is much more inclined to recognize our mammalian nature and work within that understanding as creatures of the earth, not unlike these other animals. and we can learn a lot about ourselves from animals. And that doesn't mean to overly anthropomorphize or to hate humanity because we find that the animals that we've domesticated and created to our own liking are easier to get along with than other humans. The point is to maybe apply some of those social skills to your relations with other people, and maybe if you have an easier time getting along with animals than with other humans, that might be an indication of a new Lord of the Earth animal interaction skill set that could be developed more. Because we are also animals. If you like elephants, and if you like dogs, and if you like cats, and if you like big cats or raccoons, or another arguably fun semi-wild pet candidate, crows, like, why not take it up a notch and practice befriending and interacting with humans? Humans like to be given shiny things and trade. You can play games with them just like you can with dogs or crows or parrots. You can teach them to repeat things just like you can with parrots. It's a little bit more sophisticated. Some of the smarter humans will try to do that to you too, so be mindful of that.
Very slick. Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, I think the Lord of the Earth, especially in the context of solar idealism, what makes our thing different than some other things is just that recognition. He's the connection between us and understanding that we're animals, like, and that understanding is very important. And then ties into all the other things that, like, we've talked about, human nature and things like that. But we're just whatever, like naked apes in the world, and doing things, and our behaviors are predictable to a certain things. We need certain things, and it's the job of anyone, the mature Lord of the Earth, to like recognize all those needs and not just pretend they aren't there.
Right.
And I also address the. I like it is really easy as obviously I love dogs, to love dogs and hate people. It is a tempting thing. I know someone who really, really loves dogs and really hates people. My old friend Rex, he used to put Death Curse Omega on like anyone who fucked with dogs. I was very sympathetic to that.
Because with
there
the
is
dogs,
a reason.
The dogs we've domesticated, we've bred all the cruelty out of them. If you look at wolves, like we were talking about before, wolves are dogs. Wolves are dogs in the more natural, true to nature form. There's a story back in, I want to say like 2012, 2013, about 3 wolves that came down from Canada into Montana. And in one night, these 3 wolves got into a pen and they killed about 150 sheep. And they didn't eat anything. They just killed 150 head of sheep and then left. Because it was fun. That's, mammal's gonna mammal. You look at killer whales, they do the same thing. Humans, contrary to these freaking like hippie talking points, humans are not the only animals that kill for fun, and a lot of the killing that we do for fun is not actually for fun. It's a multi-purpose show of courage and competence and other things that work within a social framework that isn't just for pure pleasure. And that becomes much more visible when you see it in the natural world as well. Like small kittens will kill things for practice, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like they're killing things for. Like my dog's trying to kill these stupid lizards out here. Like they don't even like eating them. Like they're not good. It's just like this exercise. Oh, this is exciting. Let me kill it because whatever. It's just something that they do. But I think getting back to the point of like dealing with humans, obviously, dogs are also, like you said, bred to love us. Like unconditionally, basically. So. of course you're going to like them better than people, because people don't love you unconditionally, and there's all kinds of, you're dealing with a higher animal than that, and there's a lot of more complex interaction that's going to happen.
Try to be friends with have a pet wolf, and it could work, but if that wolf thinks you're being unfair to it, and if it thinks it might be more alpha than you, it will try to put you in your place, and you'll be like, oh, it's a dick. Oh, Jesus.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's always a danger with some of those animals that seem friendly. They could change their mind. And I mean, like, famously, which Siegfried or Roy ended up getting like crunched by a tiger eventually, and spend your whole life training tigers, and then one day it's like, you know what, though, Mel? Fuck you. So we're not doing that today.
I follow a very interesting character, one of many renditions of the Florida man archetype, which is its own unique version of the Lord of the Earth. Florida men are built different. He's Chris the Gator guy, though, and he's got all these pet crocodiles or alligators or something, and some of them are quite large, and he gets very close to them and appears to be playing with them. He clarifies to his audience, like, this is not play in the sense that you think of it. And he said his sort of awakening to the true nature of these crocodiles or alligators or whatever they were, he said he saw firsthand when one of the pairs of crocodiles he had, a mating pair that had been together for 5 or 6 years. He saw them out, and at one point the female, for some accidental reason, got like flipped over on its back for some reason, and the male of this mating pair that had been together for 5 or 6 years or whatever, just on pure instinct, saw its mate flipped over in what triggered a like prey drive instinct, and immediately killed her and ate her. Just like that. And so he's like, there is no point at which you are actually a friend of these things. They have a different brain. They are operating in a different way. And if you understand that and accept that, you can get close to them and enjoy them and see them for what they are on their own terms. And that's cool in its own way. And he'll do skits that look like he's friends with them. It looks like he's playing with them or whatever, but he tries to be very clear in saying that's not what's happening. And that the ability to be able to get close to them like that and to be safe around them begins with understanding the sort of brutal truth about their nature as well. And I think a lot of people's what's the term for when you just hate people?
Misanthropy.
There we go. Yeah. I think the root of a lot of people's misanthropy begins with a refusal to begin with what people are,
right,
and to accept that initially, and our origins in nature. And in the comments here, Conan says nature is a theme park to the urbanites. I think that's very true, and I think there's a similar urbanite view of man in a state of nature that is also theme park-esque, and a lot of misanthropy, I think, comes out of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, misanthropy, and I don't want to take too long on this tangent, but it's one of my passionate subjects. Is that just because I knew so many people who literally self-identified as misanthropes, and they thought it was cool for many, many years.
Because it puts them above everyone else.
It does. It puts, of course, but also I like to troll them because really they're idealists. And they're mad at people for not behaving in the way that they've imagined that people are supposed to behave.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are bad, people are horrible, but based on the only place that you can get that judgment about people being bad is from a human mind. Like it's entirely the product of people to even think that they're bad. Obviously, you just like a crocodile doesn't. Is beyond good and evil, exactly. So I mean, it's only only a person could be delusional enough to like think my species is bad. Like that's so absurd. Like we don't, in the way that we don't know how to think in any other way than being human. So like, it's just a ridiculous concept. I think misanthropy is a ridiculous concept in the sense of like, people are bad. Can't you see that they're bad? Like, by what value? By the nature of people? Are you judging them by the nature of people or by something else? Like, are you judging them as elephants?
Right. That's you beat me to it.
Yeah. What are you judging them as? You can only judge them as people, and based on, we have thousands of years of records of their behavior. Like, that's what history is, really. Is just like, here's a record of human behavior. We've been doing studies basically for like, this is what happens when you send these people into this kind of area, and this is what interaction they're going to have. There's predictable patterns, and so like the idea that they would suddenly, that they shouldn't be doing those patterns that they've been doing for all of human history is just infantile. It's just really, and it's a terrible way to live. You're a species traitor. Miss me with that. But anyway, so do we have any more comments in there?
Yeah. Suffer No Illusion says, I think it's perfectly fine and natural for the archetypes to overlap in certain aspects. Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Matthew Seneca says, comes closer to striker with big game, such as lions, tigers with third eyes, and bears. Of course, I get a spam call in the middle of this. Normally I turn my phone off. Yeah. Striker with big game, such as lions, tigers with third eyes, bears. Yeah, if you're having to fight off a tiger with a third eye, you're well into striker territory, I would say.
Yeah. Well, at a point that then it gets into, I guess, archetypally, at what point do animals become monsters? And then
fighting monsters is striker territory.
Yeah. So it's like, is the are you fighting the animal because now it's terrorizing your village? And then that becomes like the striker, I think. Even when you were saying about the coyote thing, it was like that could go one of two ways. Yeah. Like either way.
I think the line is, is there a reasonable chance that you will actually lose this fight? That's like one of the lines, I think. Like, there's stories occasionally popping up about deer hunters who like get gored. I don't think that pushes that over. 99.9 times out of 100 it goes one way.
Right.
But with if you're hunting, bears with a freaking spear, might go a different way.
Yeah, very easily go a different way. Oops, I missed. But
Matthew Seneca also says another aspect of the Lord of the Earth this is a really good one. As it relates to interpersonal relationships, is like a judge or mediator, I think. This could overlap with the father some, like Frisian god Forseti. I don't know much about the Frisian god, but this social mediator, this being this person who facilitates relationships and social cohesion, is a very, very important Lord of the Earth social skill. And it's Lord of the Earth in the human pack mammal sense of the term. And this is one of the ones that I think gets particularly poisoned by sex pollution, because we think, that's like women's job is to sort of mediate and be the social glue. And it's true that women do this a lot, but it has, especially in the last couple of years, really stuck out to me how frequently just as a man, just being there, just being present in a family dynamic changes the tone of everything. It inherently makes things more stable to some degree. And I don't know if everyone has that effect or if that's true in every case, but it certainly can be the case. It's been the case in my experience. Some of that is just presence, but some of it is also what your presence means to the people involved based on what you've done before, as far as mediating, solving problems, correcting certain behaviors. If you have, 3-year-olds that like to hit other kids or something, what you're being the sort of person whose presence brings value. Again, it's that like fixing or creating value in social contexts. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, no, and that's one of those things. When people start in the first men, they have a challenge, and the challenges are based on the archetypes. There's one for the striker, and there's one for the Lord of the Earth. And there's a creative one, which is also kind of Lord of the Earth too, if you really want to think about it. But we do a Lord of the Earth challenge, and that's always a really tough one because it could go anywhere, and that is one of the directions that men go with it sometimes, is to work on part of their personal relationships in their life. Sometimes they'll make mead or like do something like that's that feels very fray or like very Dionysian or whatever, but we'll build something, like that, because that falls into that as well. But working on relationships, like building. I want to have a better relationship with my parents, or I want to have a better relationship with my wife, or I want to have I have this son of a certain age and he needs extra attention, and I want to have a better relationship with him. All those things are very Lord of the Earth, and that's the stuff that you have to do to keep life going. And I guess there's a certain kind of dude who thinks that men don't need social skills. Like growing up, I mean, it's kind of a blue collar archetype a little bit, that you can just grunt through life. Be like, I have an uncle who is that way. Like you just grumble and grumble and occasionally swear and then say that something sucked. The
guys who will say that everything else that other people do wrong in their eyes is just the lack of common sense, or work ethic or something. Yeah, I've worked with exactly guys like that. They're in general also terrible workers.
Yeah, and the thing is that like the men who become more successful, which falls very much into the realm of the Lord of the Earth, the men a lot of times men who can cultivate relationships better, whether it's networking. Networking, I mean, you like you said, social glue or whatever, tends to be put into a female thing, but sales is obviously an area of that, but also networking. And if you're going to have opportunities, you have to go out and make friends with all these different people and cultivate relationships with all these other guys, and be the social butterfly a little bit, so that you're there and in their mind when something's needed. Because everything in life, there's this horrible version of life that many have to go through, and I did it for most of my working career, which is the way that you live is to apply for things on a computer or on paper, and you just fill out applications for things to be selected, like in this weird, like by whatever qualities they're looking for, and not red flagged off or whatever. It's this horrible experience of life. And then, but beyond that, like above that, at different levels, it's about who you know. And to get the really good opportunities, a lot of times it's about who you know, and it's about building those relationships and cultivating them and whatever. It's like I had a buddy of mine might get me a little bit of artwork. He knew I was maybe looking for a little bit extra stuff, and he deals with an entirely different group of people than I deal with. And he's like, someone's rebranding their villa, and they need this kind of logo thing, and I think you could be great for it. And I'm like, well, yeah, all right, maybe we'll do that. And I don't normally take art, but this is how much I'd charge to like make it worth my while for 2 days, and same thing with like, yeah, man, I put a lot of work into it here in Phoenix. Like, the people who I know are people who I've gone out of my way to like, I'll drive an hour to go have lunch with you. Or like to go and do that. So we have some kind of relationship, because then you don't know. I mean, like
Yeah.
I mean, I can think, and also your conduct in a business relationship or like a personal relationship that could become a business relationship or whatever, the way you conduct yourself determines whether or not you're going to get recommended.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not just whether or not you're good at what you do. That's like one piece of it. It's also whether or not that people like you, like, and they like working with you. Like I can tell you the guy who shot Invocation of the Storm. If you were asking me for like a cool photographer guy like to work with, I loved working with him. He was fucking awesome. I wish I could hire him for more things. I'd hire, you know, like, and if someone wanted me, was doing something similar, I'd be like, you got to talk to this guy. He's great, you know, and that's all because of how he handled himself. And so like that's, yeah, the interpersonal stuff, you know, I hadn't planned to talk about, but it's such a big part of making the world work and becoming successful in the world. You know, otherwise you're just going to be playing applications. You know, like going out and building those relationships is so key.
And you can't just go out. You can't just go out and pick them. You have to cultivate them. There's a whole conversation within the Lord of the Earth domain. We sort of talked archetypically about heavy equipment operators early on, but there's a whole other one we could have about farmers and people who grow things in the ground. And relationships are like that. And it's not just about patience and developing the skills and like watching more pickup artist videos or whatever. The individual relationships themselves require watering and fertilizer and maintenance. In this way, you have to kind of keep it alive, and some relationships require a little bit more than others, but they all require something to some degree. It can't just be, you can't just let it sit on your mantle unwatered for 3 weeks and be like, oh, what happened to my aloe plant? It died. Crap, these darn plants, they just
up and dying.
Yeah. I guess I have a black thumb. Well, no, there's a skill and an understanding of the needs of these things. But I guess I'm trying to work a farming, you know, plants growing metaphor into the social relations. Yeah. The last,
well, even farming. Apparently, if you talk to Madison about farming, you know, he said there's so much relationships to go into that. Like, you know, we were joking. He's like, I might have a guy who could get us a wrestling mat for the event. You know, like, and he's like, you know, like and I'm like, well, how much would it cost? He's like, I think we could get it for free. I'd probably just have to do something else for him. You know, like it's all like these relationships and trades and all this stuff that all these guys are doing. And whether or not that happens doesn't matter. But yeah, there's all kinds of stuff like that you know, like is just, you know, tit for tat and like, you know, like exchanges of information. You know, I mean, I've done tons. You do tons of stuff like that, and you don't know whether you'll get something back for it or not. But like, if you can be helpful to a person who's successful, you know, maybe they'll help you out or recommend you for something like down the road. You know, and I've had that happen, and I've had it not happen. You know, like, you know, like, you know, someone asked me for a favor, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I can put you in touch with that one guy. Ryan Mickler, actually, that was one of the things that he always said he was good at, and I think was a good point of wisdom, was that, you know, he always says that he mostly just puts dudes in touch with other dudes. Like he like someone needs to know a guy who can do this, and so he puts someone in touch with that guy. Or like, you know, you need to contact, and a lot of successful podcasters and a lot of successful guys I know in a lot of the men's space or whatever, will ask you, like, when you're on a call, if you got along and whatever, it's like, is there anything I can do for you? Do you need to be in touch with anybody? Is there, like, you know, like they'll be like, if they like your work and they think you're cool, they're like, is there anything I can do with you? Anyone I can put you in touch with? Whatever. Because that's the way the world works.
Yeah.
You know,
this is what Scott Adams tells people is like the law of reciprocity. It's not a one-to-one. I do something for you, so therefore I can expect and even demand something from you down the road. It's more, no. I'm going to make a habit of doing things for people generally, with the expectation that because of all the value I'm putting out there, people will come to help me out, because that's the kind of animal that we are. That's the kind of like, we have this sense of fairness that, as we were saying before, dogs and monkeys also have. Does that mean every individual animal feels that? No, of course not. But does the group as a whole tend to do that? Yes, they do. You know, if you've brought value to people, they'll want to give value back. And if people think what you're doing is cool, they want to be a part of it. They want to help make it even cooler.
Yeah. And they don't always know how, you know, like, or you don't know what to ask for. Sometimes it's knowing what to ask for too, when at the right time.
That's true.
Because sometimes people ask you and be like, I don't know, I don't need anything, but you really, you could have thought of something that was actually like useful if you were on top of it. But someone also asked me, because it's been working really well. So I encourage anyone who's listening or watching to do this. I'm trying to post whenever we get the topic together for the next week. I try to post it in the Greater Mandala. And the last two, we've gotten really good discussions going, covering a lot of different aspects of things. And someone asked about finances. You know, he was thinking that was more of a father thing, but I'm like, no, that's Lord of the Earth too. Because I mean, is there anything more mundane and tedious than finances? You know, like that's definitely something that fits into that domain. And so, like, I mean, some people think it's super exciting. I don't know how that's possible, but I mean, that again, it's the way the world works. Understanding it's the same as really understanding the weather or like the soil at this point. You know, like understanding, like, I mean, like I said, I was trying to get some small business funding today, and trying to like parse out whether I was getting a good deal or whether going to be worth it, based on interest rates and whatever. And that's a whole specialty of, you know, knowledge that people, you know, would be, you know, useful to learn for a lot of people. The more you know about that, the more you can make like great decisions. And the less you know, obviously, then you're going to probably make stupid decisions.
Right.
You know, that's where you kind of need guidance on some of those issues, but or at least someone like me does. But yeah.
Yeah. I think it's on the subject of people finding these things boring, which I sympathize with the exception of crypto. I have an unhealthy and perhaps dangerous interest in that. It can be dangerous, so be careful out there, Bitcoin bros. Like,
still waiting for that shit to go back up.
Oh, it's coming back up. Actually, just today, but don't get too excited. Anyways, that tangent aside, I do think it's important, and this is another point of, it's not misanthropy, but it can be a kind of functional, I said that weird, misanthropy, when people just crap on other people's hobbies and interests. As I was like, I don't know how you could take an interest in golf, or I don't know how you could take an interest in, you know, fly fishing or whatever. And there are hobbies that are maybe easier to make fun of than others and more deserving. But in, you know, these hobbies and these niche fields that we don't have necessarily a developed understanding in, it's easy to not see what's so interesting, right? You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So it's always, I think, to the benefit of an individual man who's trying to embody the Lord of the Earth a little bit more, to try to set aside their own suspension of disbelief and to take an interest in things that you don't necessarily at first find interesting, because there's almost always something extremely interesting and fascinating to be found in these niche and otherwise obscure and apparently uninteresting fields. I can get along with just about anybody I work with by simply sort of asking them what they're interested in, and then asking questions about that thing. And oftentimes it's something I have zero knowledge of. I have one coworker who's extremely into not just college basketball, but one particular college's basketball. Has managed to find like 4 different podcasts about this one team and how they're doing. And I'm like, how is there even that much to talk about with this one team? But as uninteresting to me as college basketball is, let alone how uninteresting a single particular college's basketball might be, there is still things that can be sort of counterintuitive and interesting in terms of why one player might get chosen over another, sort of experimental team building choices done by the coach. And if you ask people about this, not only are you watering that relationship and cultivating that relationship with the other person, but you might also be learning something interesting. And sometimes it might cross apply. Sometimes it just gives you something new that you can now talk with other people about. But it's again, it's like that different approach where we're not solely focused on philosophy or studying the blade, or whatever the sort of ethereal above it all subjects of idealism, which are also good, but also like it makes the world a more interesting place, and it makes you more pleasant to be around, and it makes other people more pleasant to be around than you. More pleasant to be around for you, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, it's a skill and a mindset to cultivate like genuine interest in what the hell people are interested in and saying. I mean, and like I would not even argue. I would make the argument in most cases that the things that people do aren't interesting in some way. They're just not interesting to me, But to be able to cultivate an interest where you can ask those questions, because that's such a good social skill. Because everyone does. It's Dale Carnegie 101. Like people do like to talk about themselves and the things that they're actually interested in. So if you open, they like you immediately if you give them an opportunity to do that. And so it is a smart thing. As I've gotten older, I'm pretty self-involved, but as I've gotten older, I've tried to do that a little bit more in normal social situations whenever I'm in them. But it is a really good skill to cultivate, and it's good to cultivate, like I said, the genuine interest, because like if you look like you're going through a checklist, you look like you're going through a checklist, of things to ask and whatever,
And the thing that's made it easier for me once I discovered I could ask questions with this framework is to really, you don't want to necessarily phrase it this way, but in so many words, ask them, what is so interesting about this? Like if you're talking to someone about fly fishing, like if you can get to, and you're not necessarily understanding why fly fishing is so interesting, but if you ask questions in the frame, like as someone who is genuinely trying to see what is interesting about it, like say, oh, I heard stories that, fly fishermen get so precise about, using the right fly that they'll often, cut open a fish's stomach to see what it's been eating and then choose flies according to that. Is that true? Have you heard of that? Or, like ask questions that probe, but is that what's so interesting about fly fishing, or what is it that's so interesting about fly fishing to this person? And that can unlock some explanations of things that sometimes they're corrections. Oh no, that's an urban legend. It's not about that. It's about this and it's not for me. It's this crazy casting technique that this guy taught me, and it just feels so cool to be able to do this. You can't understand it unless you do it, but it's you have this incredible control of this small object over the water, or whatever it is. I'm making stuff up to make the point, but it can lead to a coworker of mine who's really interested in golf, which is to me the least interesting sport in the world. Like curling is more interesting than golf. The Monty Python's mockery of croquet where someone has to wash laundry and then do a somersault and then iron a shirt and then get around the base before someone, like, that is more interesting than golf to me. But my coworker's really interested in golf and I'm working with him. So I'm like, I'm talking about golf in comparison to long range shooting and to Iaido, like the Japanese sword technique. That's not kendo, but it's about like the draw and cut technique. Cause there's something that seems very similar to me with the stroke technique. And like, those are comparisons that he'd never heard before. And he thought, oh, that is kind of interesting. The crossover there. And he's explaining things about different courses and par and this and that and the other. It's still not interesting to me in general, but there's like some points of connection in how the technique is practiced for certain, swings and so forth. I'm like, okay, that's like interesting. I've heard of people getting injuries of this kind. Is that true? Oh yeah, you gotta do this right or you'll fuck up your shoulder or whatever. That there are points that can be interesting even in these otherwise very what I think are very boring hobbies and interests. Suffer No Illusion says Grizzly Maze is a cautionary tale about how grizzly bears are actually never your friend. Never fully your friend for sure. He also says something about becoming monsters in the eyes of the locals. Probably in relation to tigers with 3 eyes or killing animals for fun or something. Matthew Seneca says the symbol for the Lord of the Earth is like growing branches, but also a little like a casting net. His domain as an interpersonal is like the concept of Indra's net. No man is an island unto himself. Yeah, or like a spider's web. We call it networking. Net. Or I don't know, weaving a net, creating a web. It's got a little bit of that going on. Conan says, I have friends who play golf that I constantly ridicule. It's an old man's game. Yeah, the thing that baffles me about my coworker is he's younger than me and he's like really into golf.
I think actually Taylor, I think he might hate it now, but I think he was like golf guy in high school.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that is his thing, and his dad really wanted him to go all the way with it, and he was like, I don't want to do that. I think I remember hearing that story from him. I might be wrong, but
by the way, I'm not saying. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I was.
I mean, it's just. I think that's the right story. There are lots of young guys who get totally into golf. I mean, it's a sport in high schools that you can take. A lot of them were like be on the golf team in a lot of places. So, people get into it and it's competitive and whatever. It's just, I feel the same way about it. But like you said, we are not supposed to like each other's things. Like we can't all like the same things. And if we did, the world would be very boring. And also, like, you can have no interest in someone's specialty, but also appreciate that it's there. Yeah. My number one example of that would be cars. I don't give a fuck about cars. I got into the masculinity business late in life. I don't have time to learn about cars. That's a whole rabbit hole that you have to go down at some point to like understand how engines work, and then want to do this thing where you put everything that has to do with cars is putting your big ass hands in some tiny little fucking space, and like in this gnarled, like literally everything having to do with cars is that. Every time I've ever tried to do anything in the engine, whether it was just to take something off and replace it or whatever, it's always like, oh here, and that's in a truck. There's cars with little cars even smaller. To me, it baffles me that men with big hands want to do this. I mean, this is clearly made for like little Japanese women. It amazes me. But dudes are endlessly fascinated by the workings of engines and get so interested in all little parts. The same time with you guys with the mechanics of guns. It's basically the same thing. My interest on both of them. Well, I mean, that's a little bit more. It's open, but it's very similar in the range of like things that I don't like have an interest in, just because it's very technical, and it's a certain thing. You have to be fascinated to be like, wow, you mean that can go at blah 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 and blah 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 and spin at a blah 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 blah. Wow, yeah, and dudes I love that, and God bless them, and that's cool. That's it to me. I'm like, what I don't care. But it is obviously hugely fascinating to other men, and it doesn't mean that they're wrong and I'm right. I'm actually wrong. It is interesting, but I just not to me.
Well, that's what I was trying to say about that's what I was trying to say about golf. The fact that I find it boring doesn't mean it is boring and that no one should do it. It's cool that people do it, and it's neat. There clearly is some very interesting physiological skill involved in what's going on there. It's much more subtle though than what the kind of skill you see in like soccer or basketball or football or something like that. And that's there's refinement possible in that subtlety, and developing the taste to notice and appreciate that is its own kind of developed domain of enjoyment, and great on them. I'm sure many people feel the same way about chess, which is one of those tastes that I've come to develop. And most people would say, not only is chess a weird niche hobby for nerds, there's literally nothing physical about it, and it literally cross applies to nothing in the world. And they'd be right. And that's fine. It's just a very old game that attracts a certain kind of person, and it's its own little world that you can appreciate and enjoy and connect with others through. I feel similarly about cars to you, actually, with the difference that I aspire to one day care about cars. I'm waiting till I have a little bit more money before I do that, because it's one of those things. There are hobbies that make you money. There are hobbies that lose you money. And then there are hobbies that lose you a lot of money. And golf can be somewhere between items 2 and 3. Guns is definitely in 3, and cars are definitely in 3. Guns will burn through your bank account. Cars appear to burn through your bank account even faster. Depending on what kinds of cars you're into. And there are other ones as hobbies as well.
I mean, just generally, anything in a car is expensive. Like it's just, unless you're like doing the smallest thing, anything is gonna, like, all these guys spend so much money on. I mean, Michael Baldwin's first thing when I got my Jeep, like the first thing he asked me is like, so how much higher? How are you going to lift it? And like, what are you going to like? And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I like bought a car at a price that I could afford. I didn't want to like spend an extra $6,000 just to make it a little bit higher. That is, guys want to do that.
And there's always the next level that you can take these things to. As well. So like very unwisely, there's one coworker I have who's very dangerous for me to spend too much time with, because he's a former Marine scout sniper. And so I can just pester him with questions about guns and caliber stuff all day long. And most of the rest of the company's complaint about him is that he won't shut up. He'll just keep talking. So we'll put us in a room together. It's a full day. But he convinced me I don't think he convinced me, but he talked up and made a case for building this very exotic, strange caliber gun. And it took me a couple of years, but I built it. I finally put it together. It was not cheap. The ammunition is not cheap, but it's super cool. And I'm excited to take it hunting, not this year, unfortunately, but maybe in a future year. And I finally got to work with him yesterday. I ran into him again because it'd been a couple of years. And I showed him a picture of this, and he's like, "Why is the barrel so long? You should cut that down and put a brace on it. You can bring that down to like a 9-inch barrel. It's never quite good enough. There's always something else to be."
Oh yeah,
done with these
yeah.
things.
Oh yeah. That's all that shit is like that. Like I can only afford so many man hobbies at any given time. I mean, like there's such a rabbit hole to go down. That's why I was like, yeah, like and yeah, it's not like it's not worth going down, but like there's, you know, I know if at this point in my life everything is focused on this, and you know, how do I do this, and everything else is kind of secondary. Like I get jujitsu. That's my hobby that I get, and everything else is really like, how do I do more of this? It's not really a hobby. It's like you know, the hobbies would be like, I would love to take a few weeks and make, you know, like music stuff, or like you know, that has to do, you know, for like I thought of this idea the other day, and since we've been talking about the holy mountain,
yes.
Now I visualize that there's a nerd version of me that wants to, almost broke into Blender last night and started like trying to watch tutorials because I need an animated trapezoid out of glowing orange that I can manipulate in space, and then you know, you make it into reels and stuff like that. But I was like, I really need this, and I think I can figure out how to do it. It probably only take me like 30 or 40 man hours. But I also can't, you know, I'm not going to hire someone to do it because that costs me $500 or $600. But yeah, I mean, there's stuff like that, you know, like it's all related to this, you know, like it's, you know, that kind of shit I'm thinking of all the time, you know, like I'd love to do more art, you know, to envision these characters. Probably needs some more figure drawing backup to do that. You know, like, and just time. It's like 1 day a week at least of drawing is all I can pretty much come together with. And I need to, if I'm actually going to be a good artist, that needs like a lot more than that. So it's a little frustrating, but yeah, so much. Yeah, so I'm always thinking about stuff like that. Like the idea of like going down some rabbit hole. I'm like, what I really need to do is get like $5,000 deep in some other man hobby. I'm like, I don't have time. I can't do that. Like, but I'm building a cult. That's a big enough hobby.
Oh man.
But
Conan says, I have friends who play golf that I constantly ridicule. It's an old man's game. I'm going to skip a few comments to get to his second comment. He says, I am an old man and don't play it. I thought that was a response to the first one. It's an old man's game, but he doesn't play. Anyways. Daniel Rose says, Lord of the Earth awareness leads to local knowledge, where in your area to find fossils or arrowheads or medicinal plants or great fishing or good spots for a picnic. Yes. For the Homer group I'm running, we're listening to lectures by a gentleman named Harmar Brereton out of Scranton University, who is talking about these Neolithic cave drawings in, I want to say, Southeast Asia. I could be wrong. He was talking about a couple different parts of the world. But one of the points he says is like the locals know things that the scientists don't know, because these anthropologists or you know, historians are presenting the locals with pictures of these cave drawings that they found at this cave, and they're like, oh, we found these from like 8,000 years ago. Do you know of, like, have you seen stuff like this? And the locals like, oh yeah, there's like another cave over here and another one over there. We can show you if you want. And sure enough, there's another cave where they had these handprints on the wall going back like 25 or like, it was like 30,000 years. I want to say it was some obscenely long distance. It was long enough that there were handprints on the walls with 20,000 years apart between the different editions. So there's handprints from like, you know, 5 or 10,000 years ago. And then there are handprints from like 30,000 years ago, like 20,000 years gap there. Insanely far back, mind-blowingly far back, where people doing the same thing on this wall. And the locals are, oh yeah, we can just visit this anytime. It's not like guarded. It's not like a locked up museum. It's just there. And that's the sort of Lord of the Earth awareness that I think Daniel Rose is talking about. Just a fun tie-in from stuff I was going back over earlier today.
Yeah.
Matthew Seneca. Oh, go ahead.
Let me see. And Daniel Rose, thank you. That was, if you heard that ching, that was Daniel Rose making a purchase.
Oh, fun.
It came through my phone, and I was like, oh, hey, that's the same guy. All right. So,
speaking of which, should we take a moment to talk when we're talking about local knowledge and the finer things in life, to talk about other value of in the clothing department?
Oh, what do you mean, our stuff? Like this?
I'm talking about the prototype you're wearing.
Oh, the adventures. Oh, yeah. This is the long sleeve version.
Mm-hmm.
This is the prototype today, so I gotta sometime in the next couple days, I need to go send $3,000 to China and get 100 of these made, so we can sell them. But yeah, I mean, this is buying one. Yeah. No, I actually really like this. I'm not a long sleeve shirt guy because I like, I'm here for the gun show, but generally speaking, and so what I wanted when I designed the shirt was a short sleeve version, but the long sleeve came in and because it was an easy sample, because I was like, yeah, just make the sleeves long. I was like, because the cuffs, because the pockets have that corner, I'm like, make sure that the corners are the same down here, so it's, design is continuous, and also, like, I did make one improvement on the shirt. The hem. This is me being a nerd, but this is what I know. This is one of my Lord of the Earth skills that no one else knows about or cares about. I feel like it needs to be ironed more, because they made the hem. It was like a 1/4-inch hem, and so it would curl when you would go through the wash, which is ironable. It's fine, but on this I had to make the hem 1 inch, and I think it'll hang a little nicer and it won't curl as easily. Nice. So that was my improvement to the shirt that I had, from after wearing it for a while and whatever. So I'm hoping, they're telling me if I buy now, that I can get them in the first week of November. So that's kind of why I'm like, I'm gonna have to put a fire on this if I want to make them available for Christmas. Nice. But I think that, and it's a shame, like, we haven't sold a lot of the other ones lately, because I still can't go outside in the one that I have, because it's still too hot. I'm like, I'm going to wear this next week to this, and the other ones I'll take a few with me to South Carolina, because it'll be a reasonable temperature there. But Arizona is having a long ass summer right now. I mean, we had our 110 days of over 100 degrees straight, and then it took a nice little break for a couple weeks, and this week and next week we're back up to, like, I think it's supposed to be 113 on, like, Saturday. I still can't go outside and film pictures of this yet, because I'll sweat through it before I, like, get the camera running. So it's just, that's been a little bit of a hassle as far as marketing them. But I'm excited. I think they're going to do real well once I can do a little bit more of that. And in November, it will be hiking season. Nice. So in November here, it'll be hiking season. It'll probably be like 75 out. So I get to go hiking and wear the shirts and kind of show them off a little bit more than I've been able to do, because I can't wear them out of the house right now. So it's like tank tops and t-shirts only. So anyway, but thanks for reminding me to bring that up. But yeah,
they're great. Matthew Seneca says, golf is a game that you win by playing the least, so I must be the best. That's a good strategy. That's what they call good strategy in games like that. Daniel Rose says, try motorcycles instead. That's what I tried. My almost a decade ago now. Geez, my attempted foray into auto mechanics was, I'm going to get the easiest motorcycle to work on. And that wound up being a 1978 Honda CB750. was not as easy as most cars. You think, oh, everything is accessible, everything's available from the outside. Yeah, and the price of that is it's all jammed together, and it's a little bit different than cars. It's a little bit different. I'd never heard of an oil bath alternator before. That was a fun experience that I hope not to replicate. Motorcycles are fun, but they're not. In my experience, are not necessarily easier than cars. Lucius Cincinnatus says, late but here. Excellent. Good to have you.
Cool.
Ooh, I'm going to skip this one and save it for last. Suffer No Illusion says, definitely excited for the long sleeve. Nice. Yeah, me too, to be totally honest. I'm a long sleeve guy. Especially in the variable weather out here. Yeah. All right. Big topic, and maybe not one for this show, but we can at least address it maybe. Conan says, what is Jack's opinion on Christianity? To be more specific, I have younger men approach me on a regular basis asking my opinion on such things. I am a heathen, but hesitate to destroy a worldview. Seems to me that Christianity is slowly crumbling. Should we help kick it down?
That which is falling should also be pushed. No. No, I mean, here's the thing. Okay, when it comes to my view on Christianity, I think is fairly well established. I don't talk about that much. Obviously, Christopher wrote a whole book about why he doesn't like it, but he's much more charitable to it than I am. My personal, so many our attachments to things are so emotional and aesthetic in many cases. And my personal take on Christianity from the time that I was a wee lad, I'm like a kicking and screaming, getting dragged into church kind of kid. And I got kicked out of Sunday school, like by the priest. I didn't really respect him very much. I thought his answers were bullshit. And like basically, I'm like 12 years old, and I'm like speaking face to face with the priest. I'm like, well, why? What? You have to have faith. What the fuck does that mean? You know, like, I mean, I didn't probably say fuck at that age, but you know, I was basically like, what does that even mean? You know, like to me, you have to have faith was the very first trust the science. Like that is the exact same phrase in my head. It means shut up is what it means. It means shut up and do what we say is exactly what it means. And that's, and just something about Christianity, like it has just zero appeal to me in any aesthetic way. Like I just the figure of Jesus I find very boring and gross, and like, you know, you worship a skinny guy who got nailed to a cross. Like all of it is just so unappealing to me, and so subservient. Like it's always seemed that way, and it just always has grossed me out. And then in a more adult way of looking at it, obviously, from the perspective of what we talk about right now, solar idealism, Christianity is very, I see it as, I feel like everything Nietzsche said about it is basically what I would say about it, in the sense of like, it's, you know, the death worshiping aspect of it, I find extremely distasteful. And that's why we do different stuff. But that said, to answer your question as far as dealing with young men, a young man who was born and raised in a very Christian household, who actually believes that Jesus is the son of that particular God, and that is in his heart and soul and mind, leave it there. I don't feel the need to like talk someone out of that. And I don't think it's necessarily healthy. I mean, it's better with young men than with old men. But I don't think it's necessarily healthy or wise to try and talk someone out of that. But what you want to watch out for is what Christopher wrote his book about, is the dudes who are looking for something, and they're trying to find Christianity because they think it's practical, or because they think that it'll save the West, or because they'll think that they just need some source of order in their life, like that. Because every single Christian I know complains about their damn church. They complain about the church and that it's weak and that it's, like they'll tell you that Jesus was strong, and they'll make up all this stuff that they really just made up in their head. There's no really like backup for it. Like Jesus would have like elbowed you in the face or whatever. But you're just making things up. But that sound cool to you, so you can like this God that you already believe in. So okay, I get it. But they say all that about Jesus, but they all think that the church is like corrupt or just totally effeminized, and they're not finding the things they want in Christianity. And there are tons of Christian men's groups now trying to fix that. But that doesn't necessarily mean you can't fix as Chris and I had a sidebar conversation about the other day, like about a mutual friend or one of our friends who was questioning why his religion was so cocked, and like why wasn't it more of a different thing? And he's like, should I tell him that it's because it's that way at the core of the very thing that he believes? And I'm like, why bother? It's gonna make him mad. It's not like he's gonna stop believing in God. Yeah. So I think it's just like I said, I think it's if men are just looking for something, I don't think Christianity has what they want. But what they think they want, I don't think Christianity it's there. I don't think it's there. But for tons of people who are just, my dad's a Christian and I'm a Christian. Like if that's where you're at, then I think that's, and those guys tend to be the most natural and normal Christians, and least irritating. It's the guys who like the new converts and the converts of convenience and the converts of practicality that will argue with you and just be obnoxious about literally everything, because they're trying to convince themselves in many ways. So that's the struggle. But anyway, that's I think as much time as you should spend on Christianity for this particular show. But that's where I'm at with that, and kind of always have been.
Yeah. Well, maybe it is appropriate because Lord of the Earth is sort of in many ways.
It looks Jesus-y.
Well, it's kind of an
it looks like, I mean, ours looks like more of a Jack Jesus, but
because he says, Jesus says you must die in the flesh, die to your flesh, and be reborn in the spirit. I think Lord of the Earth, what we're talking about material success and function and flourishing in the world is a completely different focus than what you find in a religion wherein you are supposed to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all of your mind, all your strength, and to keep your heart in jars and clay in heaven, and not to be distracted by the temptations of the flesh and of the world. So like the Lord of the Earth is in some ways, and the focus upon the Lord of the Earth is in some ways antithetical to that. And most Christians that you talk to will, without citing anything theological, just citing the example of other admittedly bad Christians who have compromised their faith with practical necessity throughout all of history, say, oh no, the church is perfectly capable of doing both of those things. And say, well, yes, of course it's capable of doing that because it's comprised of human beings, who, when you ask them, will say they're not that good Christians. Okay, it doesn't prove anything. But
oh my God, that reminded me of that comment thread. I got into it with somebody in my comments the other day because when I posted about me removing my tattoo, literally a tattoo about heathen, and in the middle of it, like one guy who's a firefighter who has a podcast that I was on once. It was local. He actually like works out of the gym near me, and that's how we met. But he had made a comment that he really liked, that I said that my life is art and I'm the director. And the dude had to chime in. His friend, somebody he knows, had to chime in with, well, God is really the director. And I'm just like, I'm like, that's Christian autism is what I call that. Like you didn't read the room, and like you're just like, well, Jesus though. And you just brought it into a conversation. You started this whole theological conversation with your buddy in my thread about getting a pagan tattoo removed. And it's the tattoo that, anyway, we'll get into that. But anyway, I had a whole sidebar conversation because he ended up being a fan and he was really nice. So I was like, he didn't get all butthurt when I shot him down right away. So I was like, hey, all right, see this from my perspective. This is, I could make a post about wallpaper and there would be one guy who has to jump in and be like, well, actually, Jesus, because you guys are self-centered. You're like the world revolves around you and you want to tell everybody about it. And it's just, it's anyway.
Yeah. No, for sure. And what's tragic and maybe ironic is if you, because Jack's right. I actually, although I criticize Christianity, I also secretly enjoy it a little bit. And there are some brilliant Christian writers in the past. The C.S. Lewis's, the other, who's the guy who wrote Clockwork Orange? Anthony Burgess.
Burgess. Yeah. Burgess,
like people like that write about this, and the for them, spiritual Christian proselytizing is like expressing care for the other people. It's going to serve the poor, not with the intent to proselytize, but just to serve them and to help them. And there's very sophisticated, takes like that. That there are like good notions of what Christian spirituality should look like, and not being spiritual autist and injecting this like compulsive script into every single conversation where it doesn't belong. But it's like, when you complain about it, there's a different kind of Christian annoying person who will say, "Oh, that's not real Christianity. You don't understand." It's like, okay, tell that.
Oh, that's why I brought up.
Go tell that to your good cop, bad cop friend over here. Like don't bring it to me.
I'm not like those other Christians. Because I was talking about how they all complain about the church, and he was literally in my comments right after we said it. He's like, "Well, I follow Jesus, but I don't believe it. Like I have a lot of problems with the modern church, and I'm not, I have a lot of criticism too. So I can see where you're coming from." I'm
like, I'm like, son, all the way back,
literally,
freaking. You know how many times
every Christian I'm friends with is like, "Well, I have a lot of issues with the church," and blah blah blah. Like, literally every single one is like, "Well, I'm not like those other Christians." A lot of Christians don't like what I have to say, and like. Cute, like literally every Christian that I talk to, it's just a thing. I'm like, please tell me about how you're different.
But speaking of lords and saviors, Cincinnatus asks if you have any plans to make more of those George Washington freedom shirts.
No. No, I don't. I mean, I don't know if they're still available on the main site or not. I might have pulled them off because they were kind of a 2021 thing for me. I don't know, and I was not looking to be super. I don't know. I don't really. I mean, maybe I'm just being a fool and I should just make money, but I'm just trying to stay out of this whatever's about to go down as much as anything. I don't need to be. In that mess.
I just had an idea. I'm not sure if this would be a good idea or a bad idea, but you could take there's a certain famous picture from a recent event. You could recast some characters with George Washington in the center underneath the flag or so. I don't know. There's probably a t-shirt design in there for someone.
Probably. Yeah.
Andrew Kaleki says, in the spirit of the Lord of the Earth, would Jack consider sharing his Thanksgiving turkey recipe?
Interesting.
Might be a November special.
It is in the spirit of the Lord of the Earth, certainly. I do like doing that kind of stuff. Is he saying now, or did he say November special? I heard that later.
That was me suggesting that.
And November special, yeah.
He didn't specify a time. So
okay. real quick, because I'm an artist, I do not use the recipes. Like I just know how things are and I cook. But basically, what I would do with turkey, my preparation tends to be a kind of French herb de Provence kind of vibe. Usually, what I do is, like I'll buy just a fuck ton of butter and melt it and put it, kind of dress the turkey with all kind of butter. Chopped. I'll jam a whole bunch of chopped onions all around it, and carrots. Basic mirepoix with carrots, celery, and onions, and then stuff it with your basic herbs that normally go with it. A ton of fresh sage, a ton of rosemary, and thyme, which are pretty traditional. And then probably cook it in some white wine as well, like for the stock. That'll probably be what I would start with in the morning, and then like sometimes I wrap it in bacon, which is nice. But yeah, I mean that's always helpful. It keeps the top tender, and obviously it's bacon, so there's that. So I mean that's about how I do it. And then every year I'll mess with something about it, but it depends. Lately we haven't been having guests, so I haven't been making this giant turkey like I used to. But anyway, the cool stuff is actually the really exciting stuff. This is very Lord of the Earth now. The exciting stuff is making the gravy. That's what I feel like. The mashed potatoes is pretty easy. You just use a lot of butter and milk. However much you think you need, you just use more. And then what?
A little bit of garlic goes a long way on the mashed potatoes.
For you,
my opinion.
For you, I'm basically a vampire. Like if you put garlic near me, I'm like, I've thrown stuff out that I had too much garlic on. I'm like, I won't eat it. Yeah, some people just love garlic. I'm just like, the really exciting part is then you get to feel like a saucier when you make the gravy, and getting that right. I use Wonder flour, the stuff that's for that, basically to thicken the sauce. But you make the roux with the Wonder and the butter, and then you put the stock from the thing into it, and then just getting that flavor like just right, and also getting the stock, getting it to be the like right consistency. That's anyway, that's as much but it's not, like I said, it's not the recipe. I don't use the recipes when I cook.
We all have our nerdy value providing hobbies and interests, and cooking.
Yeah,
my wife does the cook. I've become a reasonably skillful lunch food preparer. I can make some killer pizzadillas, things of that nature. But my wife read The Entire Joy of Cooking, like cover to cover, when she was in high school, and that's you sound like you've got a lot more of that background. Cooking is another one of those skills that I aspire to develop at some point in the future, but I'm also not in a rush to get there. I feel like working on cars is something I can pick up in my 50s without feeling like I've lost time. And cooking properly, mastering the art of the barbecue, is something I feel like I could pick up in my late 30s.
Well, I mean, that is deep into suburban dad territory. That's right up. I mean, that's a whole thing like that. I mean, you aren't 40 yet, so like you don't have to be. You don't have to have your Traeger yet, but like I mean, you're supposed to have a Traeger when you get to 40, and then get into like really
smoking
obtuse, crazy like preparations of meat.
I will say though, just sort of crossing different subgenres in the Venn diagram of Lord of the Earth skill sets. I got some pheasants earlier last year, and pheasants are notoriously gamey, hard to really make taste good. They're not bad, but they're tricky to do well. And I've never really liked the way my dad has done them, which I'm only saying because I know he won't listen to this. But he has a meat pie that's pretty good, but the general way he cooks it, not that great. So I brought the pheasants to my neighbor across the street, who does have a Traeger and is actually a semi-professional cook. And I said, hey, here's the deal. If you cook these, you can have half of them. And he said, hell yeah. And so what he did is he took this pheasant, which is this notoriously dry and gamey kind of chicken meat, and he wrapped it in bacon and smoked it. And it was the best poultry I've ever in my entire life. It was so unbelievably good. And it was like KFC moist on the inside. Because the bacon both locks everything in and infuses some of its own, moisture into this meat and adds the fat to this otherwise very lean meat. But it still had the flavor of pheasant, not too gamey, but it was still there. So it's still pheasant. It was perfectly executed. And that's a neat skill, and a very valuable one if you like or find yourself in possession of very gamey meat that's otherwise, harder to cook well than, just beef you get from the store.
Oh yeah, and that's where that's where the rabbit hole will be interesting. The thing is that there's a million different kinds of cuisines to cook. You could spend the rest of your life learning to cook all of them. Sure. I mean, my taste generally comes because I spend a lot of time eating, and for a minute I did work for a French chef, but I spend a lot of time eating in nice restaurants, and I have a pretty advanced palate of like things that I find interesting that I like. But the funny thing is, like, I went through a patch of like really elaborate cooking in the classical way. Like, one learns how to cook like classical French food if you're really like, I know how to cook, and that would be actually for what you're talking about. It's kind of hard to read. I mean, it's in English, but it's just because it's you kind of have to understand the theory of the book. But the book that Hannibal Lecter always has, Larousse Gastronomique, is like the classic French cookbook that has like how you cook literally every goddamn thing, and so like if you had pheasant, it would be like, here are the 4 traditional preparations of pheasant in French cooking. And like it would be like, oh, monkey. Now I don't know if they have monkey in there because it probably wouldn't be French, but like they like almost any thing is in there, and like what you do with cooking eyes, or like cooking like sweetbreads, all the glands and all the things that you can cook. There's a recipe for everything in there. Nice. Like the French figured out how to cook it, how it was cooked best. And here's the traditional preparation for it.
You don't need to mess around anymore. We've already got the answer.
Yeah, they have the technology like that. That's what would be interesting for like you, like to go back, like this is the way traditionally to do that. Yeah. But I mean, to not think, to confuse people into thinking that I actually eat like that. What I ate today for lunch, I posted to the group because it was so ghetto. Because 90% of my eating is actually based on macros. So I'm just I'm trying to like get a little bit leaner right now this week for the event, and so like I ate for breakfast. Well, I mean, I had my protein bar for breakfast, but then I had a sloppy Joe, but I didn't actually like have the stuff to make sloppy Joes. I don't even know what's in that technically. I didn't have the manwich mix or whatever. I literally had 99% fat-free turkey, and then I poured ketchup and Cholula into it and mixed it while I was cooking, and salt. And that was my sloppy Joe. I put on a bun and ate 8 ounces of 99% fat-free turkey meat, and that is what my actual like first meal of the day was. So like, to contrast with my Thanksgiving recipe, like that's actually how I eat. But that's, like I said, that's part of it in the range of this too. Like how do you make this fantastic food, which is really one of the great joys of life is eating food. I mean, it's what we, like, it's that's it's part of our natural needs that we're being fulfilled. And so to eat at the highest level is to experience that at the highest level. And so, and the highest level could be like,
we had a long conversation about this in Vegas when we were having pork belly and octopus, and it was you and I and Dustin and a couple other people were talking about different cultures with their different foods, and which was the like did high culture correspond with what kind of food was it more nutritious but kind of gross, or was it like delicate, fancy but maybe less nutritious, or some combination?
Right.
There's a lot of different ways you can take food. It was a fun conversation that you were just reminding me of. It's
definitely, I mean, it's definitely its own little rabbit hole, like all these other things of interest. And then to some people it's like, just give me, some people hate trying new food, which I will never understand in my life. But there are a lot of guys, and just people generally, who are picky eaters, and they will only eat the stuff that they grew up eating, and they think everything else is gross, and they don't like to try new things. And I do not understand that person, but like, whatever. There's just some people who just don't have time for it. But speaking of time, do we have any more comments we need to reel through real quick?
Conan says, okay, I appreciate your perspective. Just curious. I run a gym and am in that position on a regular. Speaking of the Christianity question.
Gotcha.
A certain S. Robertson has entered the chat and says, Chris makes the best Reuben sandwiches of your life. Well, thank you.
Nice.
they're in my.
Robertson has entered the chat.
Reubens are in my short list of things I can do pretty nice. Competently to everyone's satisfaction. That's it for the comments. Cool. So yeah, that's a pretty good intro to Lord of the Earth. We'll go through the full 12-part series over the next 4 months, I imagine. Covering all of the domains of Lord of the Earth. Was that the plan?
Oh, okay. I don't know where you were going with that. I'm like, we did not discuss that. But I mean, I thought it would be good. Maybe we'll do ones on the Father and the Striker at some point too, just because I think one of the functions that we're doing in this podcast this year is kind of laying out something a new member of the Order of Fire could listen to supplement what they're reading about, or like getting more interested in stuff. Like, oh yeah, you should listen to that podcast we did about the Lord of the Earth. Like that might give you some perspective on where we are with it. Like where the Order. I think it was kind of funny the way one of the questions was in the Greater Bundle. It was like asked if we have a joint position. I'm like, do we come with those? I'm like, what is the Donovan Robertson assessment of this particular issue?
Theological doctrine. We need an official papal decree on where the hunter lies on the Striker Lord of the Earth continuum.
Indeed. But cool, guys. Well, thank you for watching. Everybody who's watched and the guys who are going to listen later on Spotify, and thanks to our guy in India, our member in India, who actually reformats those like lickety split like the next day.
He's so good.
He's killing it, because I was really dragging on that. But
he's killing it on the Homer stuff too. Which is super
fun. He's in your Homer group too? Amazing. Yeah. He's a smart kid. But yeah, so thank you guys all for following along, and we haven't talked about it between the two of us, but Chris might be doing the show, a special edition of the show next week. We'll have to figure it out.
We'll see.
But anyway, until next time, stay solar.
Stay solar.